The case I'm going to talk about today is called Septic Tank Sam. And just to let you guys know, the police actually dubbed the case Septic Tank Sam, but a lot of people find that very, very disrespectful and crude. So therefore, throughout the story, I'm going to just refer to him as Sam. So with that being said, let's get started. This tragic story started to unfold when Charlie and Mavis McLeod had gone back to their old farmhouse, which is now abandoned, in order to find a septic tank pump that had been left behind. What they found was far more gruesome. Once the septic tank had been reached and opened, the couple looked in and found it very strange to see a wool sock floating in the murky water. At a closer look, they also noticed a brown shoe. What was more shocking was that it was attached to a leg. "We went and got the cops real fast because we knew something was wrong," recalled Charlie. After the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, arrived at the scene, they started using pails and ice cream buckets to remove the mucky liquid from the septic tank. The septic tank was 1.8 meters deep, which is approximately 6 feet, so it took them some time to remove all the liquid. Slowly, bucket after bucket, the tank finally drained and they were able to remove the body. At the initial inspection of the body, the police were unable to tell how the victim died, and even worse, they could not identify the gender, which we will get into shortly. It was also discovered that after being dumped in the tank, quicklime was also put on top of the body. They speculate the killer thought it would quicken the decomposition, but in reality, it actually had the opposite effect. The combination of the water and the quicklime caused the corpse to actually dry out and preserve itself longer than if it had been left to decompose on its own. Because no additional evidence was found at the old farm, it is speculated that the murder happened somewhere else and the body was brought there to be disposed of. They thought whoever committed this grotesque crime had to be local because it is highly unlikely a stranger would just stumble across this septic tank. It's a rural area and it was an underground tank, so it could not be seen from street level. Unfortunately, the discovery of the body was not the worst of it. Once the body was brought back to the morgue, a more in-depth inspection began. The victim was eventually identified as a male, dark brown hair, right-handed, approximately 5'5" to 5'7", close to 150 pounds with medium build. They estimated his age to be between 26 and 40. While at first they thought he was Caucasian, later findings indicate that he was more likely of the Native American descent. It is also said that he suffered a serious illness as a child, but that illness has not been disclosed at this time. Because of the level of decomposition, fingerprints could not be lifted. He did, however, still have all of his teeth, and it was clear that he had had dental work done in the past. The body was also found to be dressed in a blue Levi work shirt, gray undershirt, blue jeans, gray wool socks, and brown wallaby shoes. It was also estimated that Sam was submerged in the tank anywhere from 4 months to an entire year. So what made this most one of the grisly and horrific murders? It was the fact that during the investigation of the victim's body, they discovered that Sam had suffered significant trauma and torture. Sam's hands were tied, so they know he was unable to defend himself. On his body, they discovered burn marks from something with an intense flame, something like a blowtorch. It also looked like he had been burned multiple times with a lit cigarette. The man was also severely beaten and sexually mutilated, with multiple cut marks around his genital area. How long this torture went on is undetermined. He was also shot in both the head and the chest. When they found his body, he was wrapped up in a yellow bedsheet fastened together by a long cord. The police had very little to work with, and the top priority was to identify the murder victim. Composite sketches were made and distributed throughout the country, but to no avail. With the knowledge that the victim had dental work done, Sam's dental records were sent out to over 800 dentists in the surrounding area and even featured in a number of dental magazines. But again, nothing. The case grew cold, and Sam was buried in a pauper's grave in Edmonton. In 1979, they exhumed his body to take new DNA samples, which would be stored for future testing. Multiple measurements were taken of the man's head so that a forensic pathologist could potentially rebuild his face. The world-renowned Dr. Clyde Snow would be the first to recreate the skull and then would go on to have the face built over the skull, hoping to create a three-dimensional composite. Unfortunately, this too was of no help. For over 40 years, this case still baffles and frustrates authorities. Who was Sam? Why was he so viciously tortured and murdered? There are several theories that have come up over the years, from a revenge killing to just being at the wrong place at the wrong time. Will his identity and the reason for his death be forever a mystery?